Okay, so very good evening to all. So today we are going to continue the with the concepts that we have left yesterday, right? So if you people have any queries relevant to what we have discussed yesterday, you can just throw those queries before we step into the discussions of today. So any area of understandings that you need, please do let me know. No questions? Hope my voice is loud and clear. If you have any challenge, please do let me know. Surely. Okay, so if there are no much questions, we'll step into today's discussion. So actually we are having minimal time durations. So we'll quickly get into today's discussion. So yesterday we discussed about the implementations of controller, right? So we got the difference in using at controller and at rest controller, right? At rest controller. And we are going to make use of this at controller in order to accept the request and process the request and also give the response. So just a second. Okay. So, today what we are going to discuss is I'm just going to give you some understanding of view. Yesterday we created a home page, right? So we can create more view pages and we'll see how the communication is going to happen between a view and a controller. Whenever I say controller, I'm going to call it as a back controller now. Okay, so you can create as many number of back controllers you wanted, and it's all going to be demarcated as at controller. Now, what is going to happen here is we are just going to create a form, and that form is going to be submitted to the back controller, right? So that's what which we are going to do. So since it's a banking application, we are going to see the implementation of this view as like account information. So I'm going to create add account form, add account form, and this is going to be a JSP page. Okay, it's going to be a JSP page. So you'll have some fields and you will submit it. And this submission should go to your dispatcher servlet, and the dispatcher servlet, based on the URL, it will submit it to the back controller. And the back controller, the code should be there in the back controller in order to accept all these datas. Whatever the user enters in the text box have to be accepted, and it will go to your service, and the service will hand it over to the DAO, and the DAO will hand it over to the backend. So this is the flow. So how we are going to communicate with the backend? With the help of Jdbc template. But this time, I'm not going to create the data source internally to the application. I'm not going to create any data source internally to the application. Rather, I'm going to use Jndi. Probably you would have worked on Jndi, few people. If not, anyways, it's called as a Java naming directory interface. Java naming directory interface. Have you anyone worked on this Jndi? Have you done any configurations on the Jndi in your project? Do anyone have knowledge on that? Okay. I will talk about this. So how we are going to do that? JNDI, the data source, you remember, right? How we configure the data source, what the data source will contain? The MySQL database URL, username, password, the the driver name, right? All these informations will be fed in the data source. You'll be giving it in the dot properties file and you will read it from the properties file and create a data source. But this time I'm going to configure it inside my application server itself. It's going to be configured within the enterprise application server. So the enterprise application server will have the data source configuration through the JNDI protocol. Okay, through the JNDI medium, we are going to communicate with the enterprise server and pull the instance of the data source. The advantage of JNDI is object pooling. So object pooling will be automatically handled by your the enterprise application server. So we need not manage them anymore. Object pooling will be automated and they know how to release the objects when the connection objects whenever required, and it's all more of a sufficient manner. So that's the way that I'm going to teach you in order to do the configuration. So we are going to do understand how this can be set up in the Jboss EAP server. Similar thing which you can also do it in the Tomcat. Even in the Tomcat, you'll be able to perform that. Okay. So the thing is, this is the flow. We are going to see many things, but let's see how far the time permits. We'll see how quickly we can go to the other topics as well. But right now, the main flow is we are going to create one form and we are going to submit it to the controller, and the controller is going to interact with the service, the DAO, and the database. Finally, a record have to be stored in the backend. This is the logic. So let's quickly go ahead and do that. If you have any queries on the explanation what I've given, you can please well and good ask me.
Sir, you told about JNDA, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sir, we are doing such a thing in administrator tool. We are doing that thing you are mentioned here from
Yeah.
administrator
You're
tool. We
doing
are
it in the server's administrator screen, right?
yeah, yes, sir.
Yeah. Now I will not show you administrator screen. Instead, I will do it manually by getting into the configuration file of the server and I will configure them. It's already configured. I'll explain that flow.
Okay.
So yeah, you can also do it way. That is a UI mode. Okay.
Yeah.
But instead of going through UI mode, you can understand how it is manually done.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So yesterday we already created this account, right? We had account ID, account name, and the account balance. So in my MySQL, I've already created this account. Okay. There is a table called account. Okay, instead of not spending much time on that, you know how to do that, right? So I don't want to repeat that few steps which is going to be little automated in sense it's been pre-cooked already. So we already have an account table, and in the account table there are three columns. I have just tested this and the insertion happened successfully. So the account ID, account name, and the balance is a float value. Okay, it's a float value. I've created the data type as float. So coming to this yeah. So coming to this, account table, you will see that three columns. So here where we are going to do the insert operation. Okay, fine. So for that we have this model. The account model is created, right? And we can make use of this effectively. The one important thing that you have to learn right now is I'm going to create a special form called Spring Forms. Okay, Spring Forms. It's not an ordinary form. I'm going to create a Spring form. So the UI form is going to be a Spring uh, based forms, so that the advantage is the form can be directly binded to the model. Okay, you can bind it to the model. Please make a note of it. So usually what happens is whenever you enter the data in the form, okay, and if you click submit, what happens is you need to individually fetch the data from the text boxes and you need to create the model object and load the value into it. But now since I'm going to use a Spring form and we have the option of view model binding mechanism. And through that view model binding mechanism, we can just go ahead and submit it, and automatically the uh, the data is going to be bounded into the model object. So who's going to be the model object for us is none other than your
Account.
account. Yes. So account is the model. So automatically the account object will get created. We need not create the account object. There is a meaning. Okay. Since we have the view model binding mechanism, which can be achieved through the Spring form. Otherwise, usually technically what we do is we will be using HTTP servlet request object and request dot
Get
get
parameter.
parameter. Okay. And you have to forward the name of the text box. Correct. So whatever the account ID or whatever you need to mention, and through the request object, it will return the string. And if it's an integer, you have to use integer.parseInt. You need to parse them, right? A lot of steps are involved in the traditional way of creating that, accepting the value from the forms. But if it's a float, you need to use float.parseFloat. The wrapper class have to be used in order to parse them, and you need to work around. Those things are not required right now, since we are going to use the Spring forms. Okay, so how we are going to create the Spring form? Let's go straight into the source main, and here where we created yesterday the home page, right? Inside the web-inf views directory, you'll be having skill up home. Now here I'm going to create another JSP page. Okay, I'm going to create another JSP page. And the JSP page name is going to be called as add account. The file name is add account. Okay. So this will help us in creating a default snippet of the HTML. Okay, we have this. Now here we can go ahead and do a step-by-step process. Okay. It's a one time. I have already the code, but for your better understanding, I'm just going to code them again from the beginning. Okay, so that you'll have the flow of how the code need to be written in the JSP. So the first thing is let's go ahead with the implementations of forms. So let's say I have a PR tag. So I have something called add your account details. Okay. So this is what I have in this page. So I want to get this page to be loaded. So what am I supposed to do? Go to your controller. We have skill up controller. And inside this, at get mapping. Now I want to load the form first, the form page. The form page need to be loaded. After that, you have a submit button, and there you have to invoke another endpoint. Now I'm creating an endpoint. If you hit that endpoint, it will help you to load the form, load the view. Okay. So you're going to ask them as add. Okay. View add form is the endpoint name. And here you can just give public string um, view add form. Right now, I'm just going to return the name of the page. Do I need to give the complete path? Or should I give only the name of the JSP page?
Name
No
of
need,
the
sir.
Yeah,
Add
name
account
of the
itself.
JSP page, because we already configured in the view resolver with the appropriate prefix and suffix. Yes, so we don't need to do that, right? So this is done. Great. So now let's see if that form is executed. For that, what I need to do is, firstly, I need to go to the, I'm not using request mapping, right? Because we have the option to use directly a get mapping. I go to the home page, and in the home page, probably we can have a link, right? hope it's visible. ahref slash view add form is the endpoint. Okay, add account. I'm not focusing on much of designing work. Okay, that's not the main focus of this course. So just a basic simple HTML and template like that, like that. So it's not more of complex styles or something like that I'm using. So now from this home page, we are supposed to access the add form page. Okay, now how do we do that? The steps have already been given in the skill up controller. If you notice that we already have the welcome URL, or the welcome endpoint will help you to load the skill up homepage. And going to the skill up homepage, you have a link. When you click that link, it should access this endpoint, and the endpoint will return the name of the next JSP page, which is add account. Is that clear? Okay, so let's first test that, okay, whether this is happening or not. So what we are going to do is let's start the server. So once the server gets started, let's see if we are able to access the home page with the relevant link that we have created. And when we click that link, it should load the skill add account page. Okay, so I guess we have it got started successfully. So this is the endpoint, right? Yesterday we created skill up bank is your skill up bank is what?
Context root.
Correct. It's your context root. Context root, and skill up is your controller endpoint, correct?
Yeah, class level.
Yeah, class level. We have denoted the endpoint, controller endpoint, and this is your
Method
method level
endpoint.
endpoint. Okay, so always have this in mind. So you should know how to split up this URL more clearly. Okay, so having said that, let's go and hit this URL and see if the home page is getting loaded successfully. So why this loading time takes is because very first time when you hit a request to the any JSP page, it will do that loading time. It will take some time. Now you can see there's an add account link appears, right? I've created an add account link. You can just have a look at it in the skill up home. Just now I added this view add form, but we have to see if this link works fine. But it doesn't seem to be working fine correctly because it starts with localhost 8080. So what we have to do is we have to give all the way informations of saying skill up bank slash what is the controller level endpoint we gave is skill up. Yeah. So I'm giving the complete path level information. Let's refresh. I don't want to restart it this time. Okay. I guess it should be reflected. Perfect. It's working fine, right? So we got that skill up thing, right? So when I click this add account, it takes you to which page? The add account page. Now here we need to have a form. You fill in the details into the form and then submit it. Let it be captured by your Spring MVC controller and let the controller forward that details that the controller have acquired to be forwarded to the service, and the service will in turn forward it to the DAO, and the DAO will finally use the data source mechanisms Jdbc template in order to finally insert the record into the backend. That's nothing but your MySQL database. So that's the next stage that we have to do. But before doing that, let's quickly go ahead and create the forms. So to create a form, the first thing that I have to do is I need to use a tag library. In JSP, we have a tag library. I'm not going to give more of a detail on that. Just you try to understand what I'm trying to code over here. So I'm just using a tag lib, and it will have a URI. Okay. So URI will be popped up. The name URI for referring to the Spring form. So what is the Spring form that we have? Let's see that. Here we have, right? springframework.org/tags/form. Okay. And for this URI, you have to provide a prefix. And the prefix, I'm just giving it as a Spring itself. Okay. Or let's say Spring-form. Any name you can give, doesn't matter. But you need to relate the specific custom tag library that's been utilized in the Spring framework to be applied here by using the taglib directory. Okay, directive. Okay, you have page directive, taglib directive, right? So I'm using a taglib directive, URI is referred and the prefix is provided. Now, usually what we do is we'll just create a form, right? The form will be created uh, just by saying form, right? This is what HTML form is. Form action. You can recall how a form uh, tag would look like and what are the properties. But this time I'm not going to use that form, the HTML default form, which I'm not going to use. Instead, I'm going to use the Spring form. So you need to use a frame, the prefix Spring form. See, the moment I say Spring hyphen, Spring, it can detect that Spring-form, which I've registered as a prefix for this tag library, which is auto-detected in the IDE using the auto-IntelliSense feature. And in the Spring-form, you have multiple HTML default tags have been used. Okay, there are options to use HTML5 implementations, but I'm not working on that anymore because I'm not into this JSP usage anymore in any of the projects because we are using only Angular. Okay, but to make you people understand the actual flow, what happens, I wanted to use this script and show you. So I'm not going to go more in detail with HTML5 over here, but let's start using the existing Spring form tags. So Spring form, you have a base form tag called form, Spring form. So henceforth, whenever you see a form prefix with Spring-form, it's going to be the form tag used by the Spring tag library. Okay, that is the understanding. So now, in the Spring form, the first thing that we are going to do is I'm going to create what is that, account ID, right? The first property field that we have is account ID. And here you will use input, right? Now we are not supposed to use that input. Instead, we are supposed to use Spring-form, okay, colon input. You should notice that there is something called path that appears. Okay, there's something called path that appears, right? So what is this path is? Usually we used to have ID. Input ID is what we used to have, but I'm having something called path. What this path refers is, this path name is account ID. Okay, so let's say account ID. So this account ID name, okay, account ID name and your model variable name should be same. Are you getting it? What is the advantage of following that rule? Whenever you submit, automatically the value from this text box will go and get binded into this field of account ID in the model object. Right? So that's what the path refers to. So path is referring to the model variable. Okay. you can have it's actually achieved through the setter method. It will use the setter method of that variable to set the value from this text box into it. That's going to be automated. That's the power of this Spring form. So let's come back to that shortly. Now we are going to use next input field. So before that, let's give a break, and then account holder name, account holder name, which is going to be again the same. So let's copy this. It's an input path. And the last one is account balance. This might not be more reasonable form, but at least to understand the base, I'm just using it. So it's again an input. You can have any other input fields if you wanted, password or something like that. Now I'm going to use the final thing called input type equals submit. This is an HTML tag that we are going to use, not the Spring. Input type equals submit. Okay, and value equals add account. So this is a ordinary submit button. Okay, ordinary submit button. Is that clear? This submit button will help us um, to submit the form. But where the form to be submitted? Where are we going to submit the form? That is another question. So we need to have the action to whom we are going to submit. We are going to submit to a specific endpoint, and let the endpoint be called as add. Okay, add is an endpoint, or let's say add account is the endpoint, and that's the action. When we click the submit button, it should hit that particular add account endpoint. The next one is method. So what type of a submit operation that we are going to do here is we are going to use post, right? Post submit. So it's not a get request, it's a post request. Okay, so post requests are not idempotent, right? Uh, so post is not idempotent. So every time when you send a new submission, it's a new object that it deals with. Okay, it's not going to do any updations or something like that.
The object
So
value is also not shown, Lasa, in post.
come again.
The values which are taken from this ID holder name balance, it not shown in that browser
Correct.
level.
Yes. Post is hiding your parameter informations. So the query parameter, we call it as a query parameter. In the URL, the query parameter is thoroughly hidden. Okay. But if you go for get, it's revealed. So that is also another advantage. Now, one more thing that we are supposed to use here is called as a model attribute. There's another property called model attribute. What this model attribute says. So this model attribute is going to be referring to the object of the account. We have the model class, right? For that model class account, we are going to create an empty object, and that empty object is going to be binded here. So when we do this binding of this account object to here, the whole form will be bounded to that object, and automatically whatever the default value is there in the object will be feeded into the respective input fields. So when you submit again, all the value what you enter into the text box will go back and get inserted into the object. So we are referring to the instance of the account, or we are referring to the instance of the model using this model attribute property. Okay, I'll come to this. I'm leaving it everything empty. This one is empty. Paths are empty. Okay, we are not filling it because we have to do a little bit of coding on the controller part. We'll do that. What we did before. Okay, so shortly I'm just going to no, it'll work. So what actually happening here is there anyone? Okay. In the skill up controller, if you noticed, what we return from this view add form when we hit the link is just the name of the JSP page. Yeah. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a slightly a different flow. Okay. The different flow, what it is like we are going to use a model and view approach. Okay. So internally, it's not going to be a return of string anymore. I'm going to use something called model and view. Okay. Model and view. We will call it as MV as an object, new model and view. So while you're creating this model and view, you are able to apply three different parameters. Okay. The first one is the view page. What is a view page? That we want to open from here is add account. Okay. Now see, I'm not returning string anymore. I'm going to return model and view object. Along with the return of this page information, I'm going to return even the object reference name, and the object reference name is going to be account or anything, any name you can give. This name, okay, the reference name is going to refer to whom? To the new account object. This is the way we bind the model and view. Empty object. It's just an empty object. You're getting it? So what this model and view contains is we have the view page, the view page name, the JSP page name. Before we were just returning the JSP page name alone, but this time JSP page name, a reference identity name, okay, a reference identity name, and the reference, the object is here. Is this object is empty right now? Yes, the values inside the object is empty. We have created one object, a reference is created, and the reference is referred by an ID called account, and it's going to take it to the page called add account.jsp page. When it goes to the add account.jsp page, when it goes along with this object and bind this object to that particular form that we created. What form we created? A Spring related form, right? You remember that I mentioned something called model attribute there, a property called model attribute. I kept it empty. I left it empty there, right? So what need to be filled in that now? In the model attribute of the form, now we are supposed to
ACC.
fill in this. Correct.
ACC.
Yes, exactly. Very good. We need to fill the ACC. So what happens is the whole form is bounded to this model object. Account is a model, right? We are binding it. So what is advantage is, we will see that what is advantage shortly. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and launch this by returning the MV. So model and view is a class helping us to load the model and view details, model details and view details. Okay, that is what it means. So your return type is going to be model and view instead of the string. Okay, so see how slowly we are grooming ourselves into making this application more dynamic. Okay, so now let's go ahead and see how the reflection is going to be now when we launch the application. So let me try to do a full publish. So, okay, I guess it's got fully published. Now, if I click this, there is an error. Yeah, the error occurs. So now the exception that's occurring here is saying, hey, I'm trying to load this page. Okay, it goes to that and tries to load the page, but it is all empty. Everything is empty. So in the model attribute, what we need to fill is the name called account. And in the path, we are supposed to fill in all these field names. This name and the path name should be same. Keep it in mind. Very important to make a note of it. So refer the specific path informations using the variable name of the model class or the account class, right? So now let's try. So it clearly states that bean name is empty. Okay, no binding result is happening there. Perfect. Once after we have feeded all the right information, what happens if I give a wrong name like account 1? It will throw in again errors stating that there is no such bean reference existing. Okay, so this name what I give here, and in the controller while we are trying to load that form, the name should be same. So when we hit this endpoint only, this form is loaded. On the click of this link, okay, on the click of this link from the home page, where it goes to the controller, the back controller. It goes to the specific endpoint, the back controller, and there it is returning a model and view. The model and view holds what? All the details relevantly, and with that help, we are able to see the form successfully. It's just a fraction of a second, everything happens. Now the question is, how come is that by default the values are 0 and 0.0, and why it is empty? Any idea? Before usually we will not get this default values, right? If it's a traditional HTML form page, we will not have these values. How come these values are launched?
In
Now it's a
Java,
proof. Yeah, it's a proof that this form is successfully bounded to that what? The account object, correct? That's what we did, right? Before we load the form, we gave this new account instance there, right? By using the reference ID called ACC, that's been bounded in the form. So the form is already bounded to the object, and from that object, the fields are also the same name as the account class field name. The default value for those fields of integer is what? 0. Default for float is what? 0.0. And string is by default empty, because those are class level fields. So they will be having a default initialization. If it's a local variable, we need to have an explicit initialization, otherwise it will throw an error. Those are all the stories. So it's a proof that your object is successfully bounded to the form. Now, whatever you enter here, and when I click add account, it should go and get binded back to your empty object. It will get added into the account references. That's how it means. You're getting it. So now let's go back. If I submit it, you will not see anything. So let's say 1-to-1 Balaji and some balance. Okay, so now what happens here is when I click add account, you'll see not found error. Why? Why am I getting not found error? It's because
we know
there is no endpoint. Yeah,
endpoint is.
correct. So in the add account page, we have given an endpoint. When we click the submit button, it should go to whom? It should go to this add account endpoint. But we haven't provided that endpoint anywhere here in the controller. So when we click the submit button, you should have another endpoint to handle that request. So public, this time what we can say, a success page. So let's say string what is a welcome view add form, right? So let's say add account method, and this is going to be demarcated as at get mapping, and this is going to be slash add account endpoint. So now we have this endpoint. Now here, let's go ahead and use some. I'm creating another JSP page called as success.jsp. Hit next and finish. Okay, so you can just say successfully account added successfully. Okay, so this is just a piece of a message that I want to say. So I'm going to return the success.jsp. For that, you can just say success. No need to give that prefix and suffix here because it's going to be manipulated by the view resolver. Now let's see how it's going to react. Go to the SkillUp bank and then trigger the
Sir, sorry, sir.
yes.
Actually, in form, we provide a method type as post, right, for add account.
Yes, correct. Thanks for reminding. Yeah,
Yeah.
we use the post. It should be a post because it's a form submission. Anyways, not an issue. We'll see what the error is going to be. I don't want to change it. Obviously, we'll get that error. So okay, I guess it got founded. So add account, feed in something. Now it is not saying not found. Now the error is different. Why? Because the endpoint is available, correct? We have a correct endpoint called add account, but the add account is eligible to that endpoint is accepting for what request? Get request. But what is that we are submitting from the form? Post type of request. So request method post not supported by this endpoint because endpoint is enabled with what mapping? Get mapping. Is that clear? Anyways, it's good to see that error. So it's a confirmation that this is submission is via the post submission. So it should go only to what mapping? Post mapping. Is that clear? This is how it happens. So we'll go back to the endpoint and just have a slight change saying, hey, it's not a get mapping, it's going to be a post mapping. And import them to one round of publish. So now let's go back. Perfect. Account added successfully, but actually we haven't done any of the business logic to successfully insert the account details into the backend. But the flow is working fine. Starting from the home page, going to your add account form page, filling in some details and clicking the add account, and takes you to the success page. But we need to ensure whatever we have filled in the form, right? Whatever we are filling in the form is getting captured by this endpoint. This endpoint should capture the data, whatever we enter in the form, right? So how do we enforce that? All these data are going to be stored in what? In one object. Whatever we enter should be get stored in the particular object. So this model attribute will be mapped. We are going to map the model attribute. We are going to map the model attribute to the particular object in the argument of the method. So we have something called at model attribute annotation. Using that, we can map the object of account to this form, and whatever you enter will be injected to it. So we need to do that step in order to capture these details. If you don't want that, what you're supposed to do? I don't want the form submission in that way. Then you have to go for HTTP servlet request. You can ask for that request. Okay, and you can do all the request.get parameters logic. Request.get parameter, as I said, and give the name of the field, let's say account ID, and then you have to fetch the information. But this is not how we are going to use it. So we don't need to do that additional lines of code. So this will, if it is a 6 input fields you have, then 6 times you need to do the request.get parameter. And the get parameter's default return type is what? String. If it's an integer, it's your task to convert that string to a specific int type. So you need to use integer.parseInt, parseInt, and then you need to pass them, and then you need to create the object and provide the values in the constructor of the object, constructor parameter of the object, and then you manipulate it. Those hassles are not there. It's going to be hassle-free approach. The only thing is I'm going to do at model attribute. This at model attribute annotation will be applied before the field name. And the field name is what? Is going to be account. Okay. So, and give account. But it is coming from the specific account. So you can give that name, the model attribute in the form name referring to this, right? So this name is what I'm going to give. So that particular instance is what is going to be bounded. So the name of the model attribute that you're going to give here and the name of the model attribute that's injected in the form model attribute name, and the name in the at model attribute annotation should be same. So what happens now is when I submit this form, it comes to this particular method and identifies the method has a parameter, and it looks out whether the form model attribute name is account. If it's account, then it captures the entered value automatically, manipulated with the respective data type operations, and then create an object filled in with those details. You're getting it? And this can be further, okay, this can be further manipulated for different reasons. So what we do is we'll just say sysout and put it as account. Okay, just to print and see if the value what I'm entering is getting captured in the console or not. Okay, we'll just try to see that. Are you getting this? So this is the way in order to capture the inputs. Binding. Now what is binding? What is getting binded? The object model. The object model. Yesterday people were asking about the binding, right? So this is your view, and the view data is bounded to this object called model. So what binding is happening? View model binding is happening. That is the meaning. Is that clear? So if you have any questions, please do let me know.
Sir, whenever I click the submit button in that form, first it will come for the particular endpoint in our controller, right?
Correct. Actually, yeah, of course, in the reality, what happens is when you submit, it goes to the dispatcher servlet with that specific URL, right? And the dispatcher servlet will make use of whom? Handler mapping. And the handler mapping will look out for which controller it has to hit and which endpoint. And the dispatcher servlet will get that information, give it to the handler mapping adapter, correct? Handler adapter class, and the handler adapter will communicate with the respective controller. And in the controller, it comes to the specific endpoint. Before coming to that endpoint, who's calling this method actually? Who's going to call this method? Who's the caller of this method? Actually, the dispatcher server. Correct. So that's why he's using the helper class to call the method and cook up that object and hand it over. Someone who's calling should forward this object, right? That's been identified with the help of model attribute. It's all internal communication for this dispatcher server to make use of the right helper class to forward the object correctly. Who's cooking up again? Who's going to cook up that object? This object from the form, the binding, the cookup, everything is done with the help of this dispatcher servlet only, which we are not getting to know about it. You're getting it? So that's how the operation happens. Yeah, you tell me now what is the question, because I just want to give you the exact flow. It's not directly coming to this controller. Okay, please make a note of it. Every request, any number of time you give, it has to come to the first person called the dispatcher servlet. Without the knowledge of dispatcher servlet, you cannot directly come to the back controller. All your requests have to come via only the front controller. The channel of communication is through front controller. Please tell me what's your question now.
Yeah. Whenever we click the submit button, it match the model attribute in the form as well as in the controller endpoint, right, sir? Then it will
Correct.
bind the object into that account object.
Correct. It is binding the account object.
Okay.
So the object is already cooked, right? The
Yes.
object is already cooked and it is kept in the object pool. So what the DS will do? DS will make use of that pool and it will go and find for this ACC object, and it will take all the values from the text box and it will bind it, and that object will be forwarded to this. After filling the information, it will forward it to it. Clear?
Okay.
Yeah. So now let's see how it's going to react. So let's go ahead and do a full publish. Okay. So we have to closely monitor here on the console screen. Okay. So I'm just clearing it. So let's say 121. Can you see? The same information is what is printed from this account object. It's a matter of second the binding have happened. I didn't do anything individual fetching of the value from the text boxes. We need not meddle with that pattern of code anymore. Number of lines of code is effectively reduced by using this better standard of architecture called Spring MVC. Is that clear? You can also do without this. So let's say, for example, I'm not going to use this account. Okay, it's just a model attribute, right? I'm not giving anything as such. So let's go back. I'm not giving this name. Okay. The identification of the instance is not provided, but I'm just leaving it with just at model attribute. That's all.
Sir, if it's incorrect data type, na, how the error will be handled, sir?
Explicit error will be raised, so it cannot do the binding properly at the runtime. It will throw that the matchable bean is not found.
Okay. Okay.
Still the output is there. Can you see this? The reason why I'm still getting an output here is you don't need that name. It need not search for the existing empty object for it. Still it will automatically load it here. How? Instead of accessing the existing object, what it does is it creates a new object of account. Okay, new object of account, and fills all the form details and forwards it. So then when you will use this object?
Storing the value to the database.
No. See, when should I use this object? That why do I use the name here? Before I gave the name. No, I'm not giving the name.
Since it's a single method, sir, here in this add account, in this controller.
No. The
Only
question
one.
is, we had a model attribute with this name here, right? I gave the name.
Correct.
Thinking that this object is what is brought and bounded here. Now I didn't give the name. So what it does, it creates a new object and fills the data and forwards it. That's fine. It's working fine. We get the same data. But the question is, when do we go for that approach? When do we need to access this?
Multiple.
Multiple? It's not about multiple. What happens here is, let's say I'm creating this object. Okay. I'm creating the object with some set of informations. Let's say 121 is the ID. What is that going to be? Anyways, we don't have such kind of a one parameterized constructor, but I'm just setting it. Let's take it this way to be more precise. ID is not going to be created by the user. Okay. For example, I'm saying I will not have that field. You're getting it? Account dot set account ID, and this is going to be auto generated. For example, you assume that way. But what are the other two informations along with this account? Account holder name and balance, correct? So these two informations will not be here, but you will just forward this account. And assume that in your JSP page, okay, how come this 121 comes here by default? How it is by default when I load the form itself, it is coming with 121 because I have already
The value in control.
set the value. Yeah. Now what is missing? What two things are missing? The name and
Name and
balance.
balance.
Forget about. Okay. Now temporarily you forget about. I don't have this field here. We don't need this field, right? We don't need this field. You're getting it? I will only enter these two informations. But when I submit, it should come to that model attribute. But when it is coming to the model attribute, what will happen now? In this case, what will happen? In this piece of snippet, what is going to happen?
Parameters.
No, what this means, just now I explained what this means. This will do what? It will create a
New object.
new
Empty
object.
object.
That new object, it should add three informations, but only one information, two information only it can set. What is that? Name
And balance.
balance. What happened to the ID?
ID will be default to 121.
No. Why it will be defaulted to 121?
Empty. ID will be
Zero.
empty.
It's a new, yeah, it's a new object, right? New object is created. Why it is defaulted? Default of new object is what? Integer is 0.
Yes.
But you will not get that 121 here. To get that 121, which object you need to access?
ACC.
Where you need to provide the name in that case. You're getting it?
Yes.
Right. So if you want to capture the same object with some feeder informations also here, by submitting the form, it fills in and then submits. That's all fine. But if you don't want this object at all, then you can go for helping out with the new object creation itself. Okay, it's up to you how do you want to work around. It depends on the use case. But I'm showing you both the demos with the accessibility of this account and without the accessibility of this account. Either way you can do it. Is that clear? So don't think that but the model attribute annotation is mandate, because it instructs that the model attribute object should be assigned here. If it is available, it will pick that one and fill all the details from the text box and map it. If it is not available, right, as in this case, it is not available, it will create a new object and then fill the details, and probably this account ID, you will not get it if in case that text box is not there. Okay, so that's how the understanding is. So either way you can work around. Okay, so right now we'll go back with the old story. by using account. Okay, I'm just commenting it for a while. So this account object is empty right now. So if we publish, you will see that it will not be defaulted to 121. Instead, what the text box will be defaulted to?
0.
0. Very good. Yeah. Because it's a object which is not filled with any values. See, it is coming back to 0. Okay, that is what it means. So it's a proof that you can understand that this object is tightly binded with that form. Okay, with whatever value that you have applied will be captured. If not, default value will be taken out. Okay, so now we got this object. What we are going to do with this object now? So in different means, you got the understanding of how to effectively we can use this at model attribute. But what we are going to do with this object? Anything that we need to do? Yes. This object need to be forwarded to whom?
DAO.
Service.
First, we
Service.
forward it to service.
Service.
Service will forward it to whom? To
DAO.
DAO. And DAO will finally do the insertion
Database.
call and update it into the database. Shall we see that flow now first? Okay. And then we'll go for the other concepts. So stay focused, stay attentive. It's going to be very important steps. So as I said earlier, that I'm not going to use a traditional data source implementations like how we did in the American Express project. What we did was in the configuration, DB config we had, and in the DB config, what we did, we created the data source manually, correct? Can you see this? We manually created the data source, and for that first you need to go to your resources, and there you will find one properties file, and in the properties file you need to feed in the data source information, username, password, and everything. And then in the configuration, you need to fetch the property information by using that value, and the property file should be loaded like this. And then you will create the data source, and the data source will be binded to the Jdbc template. This is one approach. Same approach we can follow in web application also. Similar thing, I can copy paste, it will work. You will get the Jdbc template, you complete your insertion work, updation work, CRUD, or whatever you wanted to do. But I wanted to teach you the other way around of configuring this data source by using a JNDI. So JNDI, as I said, it's a Java naming directory interface. Through this JNDI mechanism, your object pooling will be automated. Effectively, the object pooling will happen. So based on the availability of object, the object will be returned connection object for communications. Otherwise, the object will not be returned, or if the object is not in use, it will be coming back and it will be kept it not used. The next person who comes in will be using that same object which was kept not used in that scenario. Unused object will be reused again. So effectively, the object mechanisms will be manipulated. Why we need this approach is because when we go for high-end applications where you have some 20,000 requests comes in per second, okay, for per second 20,000 requests, then 20,000 connection objects will get created. The next second, another 20,000 comes in. But in the third second, this 20,000 connection is not in use. So for the next third 20,000 connection object, the 20,000 connection object, firstly, what got created can be reused, right? So that your performance of the application can be stably maintained. So in order to avoid the manual intervention of handling the pooling mechanisms, we are going through the JNDI source. So what is needed for JNDI? If it's an Oracle database, or if it's a MySQL database, or if it's like an in-memory H2 database or DB2, any database, the settings are going to be the same. The very first thing is go to the server, and in the server you can see that this is the Jboss server. You have something called file sets. Okay, you have something called file set. Under that you have a directory called configuration, and under that you have standalone.xml. This is your configuration file. Okay, This is your configuration file for Jboss server, Jboss EAP server, a wildfly or EAP, anything you remember. What is the name of the file? In any interview, if they ask, standalone.xml. Why it is standalone.xml? Because the server is a standalone server. It's not a remote server. You recall yesterday while I was adding the server, it opts two things. I'm sorry, it prompts for two things. One, is that a standalone configuration or is that a remote? If it's a remote, you will have a different configuration file. But right now, I'm just keeping it as a standalone XML. Standalone XML is the configuration file for your Jboss EAP. Okay, so we'll get into this file shortly. Now, before that, I'm going to take you to the location where I have this Jboss server installed. Okay, so here where I have my Jboss EAP, the server. Okay, Jboss software inside the Jboss EAP. And in this Jboss EAP, okay, you will have multiple folders. Okay, in that the one important folder that you have to look out for is modules. In this modules folder, you will have all the dependencies to be configured. Okay, inside the Jboss EAP, you have modules folder. Go into the modules folder. You will find system. Inside the system, layers. Inside the layers, base. Inside the base, you have something called com. In the com directory, you will already notice that there is a database like H2 database, right? So inside this H2 jar will be referred. Okay. Similarly, I have created a folder inside the com. I have created a folder called MySQL or directory called MySQL. Inside that MySQL directory, directly I've placed a main directory. Inside the main directory, I've copied the connector jar. Do you recall that we did this, right? MySQL connector jar we added in the project. But right now I'm adding the jar file inside the server of this MySQL of this Jboss location. So jar is added. This is your driver library. MySQL driver connector library jar file is added, and you have module.xml. Supportive file is required. We need to create it as an XML file. Now, what will be there inside this XML file? I will explain. I will share this source also, this module.xml source. You can watch this video once again to follow the steps. So if you look at this module.xml, what is there is this is one thing. Okay. So what we will be having is the configuration for the MySQL database. Okay, so that's what is going to happen. Okay. Quit. It might be small. Try to adjust because I'm unable to zoom in. If I zoom in, it's getting hanged. Okay. So yeah, see, this happens. Okay, it's fine. Now, if you look at this file, okay, what is there inside this file is it's just starting with the root tag called this is a module tag. Okay, there's a tag called module, and inside the module name, there is a name I've given com.mysql. Please make a note of it. There is a name called com.mysql. I have given a name and the module reference index number is given. Then there is something called properties. In the property, they have given the Jboss API unsupported. This is default settings. We need not touch anything. There's something called resources directory. Inside the resources directory, we have resource-root path. What is this path is? The path is the location where our jar file is located. Where is the jar file located? In the same location of the module file, which is located here. Module file and the jar file are in the same directory, right? So in that case, if you look at that if you look at this file, you can see that I mentioned that jar as a path for the resource root. Then there is something called dependencies where it will use this jar will use javax.api, javax transaction.api. If needed optional, you can also have javax servlet API. This is absolutely optional. That's why optional is true. But these two are mandate for any database data source configuration. Okay. So this piece of information is what you need to carry in your module.xml. Is that clear? So this piece of information should be there present. And you should ensure you download the jar file. From where you will download this my connector Java jar file? You should go to the Maven repository. Okay, MySQL Java connector Maven. Just search for it on the Google, and if you Google it, you'll get the location from where you can download it. It's a little slow. So, sorry. MySQL connector Maven. So go to the Maven repository. You can get the latest version downloaded. Right now, what I have in my location is the latest version. Okay, 8.0.25 is the latest version right now we have. You can see that here. So click on the 8.0.25 and you have the jar. Just click on this, it will download. Okay, and you can copy that jar and place it in this directory location. Modules, Jboss EAP, modules, system, layers, base, com, MySQL, main. Inside the main directory only, you should copy paste this jar file and create a modules.xml and have the code snippet in place. Okay, so this is actually not required. Is that clear? Are you getting it? Once this is done, then where we need to come to our Jboss Server standalone.xml. You can double click this standalone.xml. Here where I'm going to configure the JNDI informations. So in the Jboss configuration file, if you scroll down, okay, here we have a subsystem. Okay, we have a specific subsystem that we have created, and in the subsystem, I have created we have the data sources. It is called as the data sources. And inside the data sources, there is one data source. Means why it is called as data sources. You can configure multiple data sources mapping to different databases. Oracle, MySQL, you can have as many number of data sources you want to configure. So this is one data source configuration for H2 database. Okay, this is for H2 database. What you are seeing right here is your MySQL database, which I've already configured. Okay, so data source JNDI name will be triggered like this: Java Jboss / data sources and / MySQL DS. Any name you can give. This too can be any name. Okay, anything that you wanted, you can exclude the also. You don't need this directly from Jboss / you can give any name for the JNDI. And the same name I'm giving for the pool name also. Okay, MySQL DS. And if you look at the connection URL, this is all the same what we have already given in the property file, right? You need to recall that the URL and MySQL driver. I'll tell you what is this MySQL driver is going to refer. Security, username, and password. Okay, so these are the information that I've given. And where is the driver name? That's what will be separately configured. Along with that, for validation, they have given the MySQL connection checker. It will check internally whether the connection is established or not. Okay, it will internally check while it is getting configured. And background validation should be true. Background, it will validate for it. If exception sorter is there, it will just refer to the sorter of MySQL exception sorter. These are MySQL related configuration. This is ultimately optional. You don't need to go for this all time. If you look at in this data source, they didn't configure. So this settings is optional. But if you look at the previous one, okay, this is very much important from the connection URL till the security, username and password. Then the thing, the driver name, MySQL, how it comes here is, if you look at the down a little bit down, you will see that I've created a driver, one driver for, we have drivers again. Okay. One driver for MySQL, another driver for H2 database. In this driver tag, MySQL, this name and this name is same. So while we are configuring the JNDI, instructing the JNDI to make use of this driver information. Okay. This is the mapping, right? And we have a module com.mysql. I told you to make a note of that name, right? In the module.xml, I kept the name because if you refer that name, it will help you to pick that particular jar file and locate the driver class name com.mysql.cg.jdbc.driver. So this will help us to map the specific jar file which is located in that module main folder. The jar file will be located and it will help us in tracking this driver class name. And the data source that is going to be used here is XA data source, transaction enabled data source called MySQL XA data source. This is the data source that we are going to get for JDBC template. For JDBC template, we are going to get what data source? MySQL XA data source will be returned, and that data source will be used for communicating with the MySQL database. This is the process. This is a one-time attempt which you need to do. Okay, so that your JNDI is enabled. Now, what is the JNDI name that you have to refer? Is Java colon Jboss slash data source, this one. So we need to copy this and keep it somewhere safe so that we can use it whenever required. So what are the configurations required is you need the data source configuration, and along with the data source, map it to the driver information. And in the driver information, you are supposed to map to the module which we have created. The module is always here, right? This module, in this module .xml, we have kept that name. That name is what we are referring. If you give any name differently, it will throw an error at the run at the startup of the server itself, because this is a server configuration file. Anything goes wrong in the server configuration file, it will not allow you to start the server itself. Okay. So if you have any questions on this, please let me know. Now, how to use this data source, how we are going to use this data source, that's what we are going to see next.
So for Tomcat, it's different.
Tomcat is also more or less same.
I
But
think I tried to find the modules, but it didn't find him.
No. Don't look at modules perspective, but this configuration seems to be a little similar. I'll just get you some reference links for working around with Tomcat. Uh, there the folder structure is different, right? This is JBoss
Yes,
folder structure.
yes,
There
yes,
the folder structures are different. That is a different approach.
yes,
Steps seems to be similar. Okay, but the folder names and the folder locations, those will vary.
yes.
And there it is Tomcat, here it is Jboss. Okay, so those things will slightly vary, but JNDI creations mechanisms will be more or less similar. Any other question? Did anyone worked on this server level before on enabling the JNDI? Probably if you have worked on it, then you will get to know the flow. And it's across the servers, it's all more or less similar configuration, but the locations of the folder implementations might vary. Okay, so once this is done, now I'm not going to use any of my property files or nothing like that. I'm just going straight into the configuration class. And here I'm going to create one more configuration called what? We'll call it as dbconfig and mark the dbconfig also as what? Configuration class, correct? That's what we did in earlier as well. So mark them as at configuration. We don't need the properties right now, so I'm not going to use them, but I'm going to bean for the first thing that I'm going to bean for is public data source. Get data source. I'll just call it as a data source. So inside this is going to be very simple. Now, one thing that you have to notice is I'm going to use Jndi template provided by Spring. Can you see this? There is org.springframework.jndi and you have Jndi template, right? So this is what I'm going to use. Why we need to use the Jndi template tool? This Jndi template will help us to look up. You would have heard this term called lookup, right? Lookup for the Jndi that has been created in the server, in the specific server where the application is going to run. This application is going to run in the Jboss EAP. Inside that server, it will go and look up for the Jndi instance. Once you get the Jndi instance only, you will be able to get the data source. You will be able to get the data source. You're getting it? So what we do is we'll just go and use Jndi template object manually. This is a manual creation of the object, new Jndi template. Jndi template dot Jndi template T in caps. Okay, so if you see here, there is one important method in the template called lookup method, and the lookup method takes the string as an argument. Now, what is the string that we need to drop in here? Any idea what we need to look up for? The Jndi reference that we have
JNDM.
created. Yeah, the name that we have created in the server, right? So let's go back to the standalone.xml. Go and look out for the Jndi name that you have given. So what is that Jndi name? I'm sorry, not this one. Correct? Java Jboss, right? This one. You come back to the DB config and throw that. The return type of this lookup object is object topmost class. So we need to just typecast them to a data source. Okay, just typecasted them to the java.sql data source. Okay, and you from here you can say return. Okay, but this lookup is actually working around with some exceptions. That is, this is not relevant to Spring JDBC, so we have to apply naming exception. What is that naming exception? If the name is wrong, then it will throw an naming exception. Okay, so you can either have a try and catch here itself to appropriately handle. So I guess this return does not make a sense. So data source equals null, and use this data source here, and then close the try, start the catch, naming exception. Always Jndi will end up with a naming exception. Okay, so go for that exception dot print stack trace, and finally return the data source reference variable. If the reference is instantiated, it's going to return the appropriate data source. Otherwise, the data source will be null. Is that clear? Is the clarity is there on understanding this code? The one last bean that we have to create right now is at bean. Now what we need? We need the Jdbc template. correct? But we don't have the JDBC template. So I'm going to go back to pom.xml, and there you have to go to the dependencies and add and type down JDBC Spring JDBC, correct? Spring JDBC. So it pops up. You can make use of this 5.3.7 version. The latest version of the Spring dependencies is what we are using. After adding this dependency, you will be able to get the JDBC template. I didn't save it. Is that? No, we got it. So JDBC template. And inside this, we have to have JDBC template. JDBC template equals new JDBC template. And you need to forward the data source informations here. So you need to call that constructor level referencing or constructor based wiring. Constructor based injection is what we are doing, and return the JDBC template. You got it? So both have been in place. It's been successfully set. So these are the two configurations that is initially required. That's all. Now what we have to do, we have to go back to our main skill up configuration. And there, one last step that we have to do is we have to use what? Can you recall? At import of the class. I'm sorry, at import of the specific class that you have. So value equals, you can say db config dot class. So this is what which you need to import because we have split up the configurations. So it will join in this main configuration class. You can split up as many number of configuration classes you wanted so that it will be aligned perfectly, and readability is there. Maintainability is high when you have a split up of configuration files in place. Is this clear? If you have any questions, please do let me know. So let me restart this. And see if we are able to successfully launch the application. Hopefully there should be no error that's getting raised before we had some error. Let me see if we are going to get any error or not. As of now, there is no error, but we have to wait until the skillupbank.bar is successfully launched. Dispatcher server is getting launched. Now IOC container is triggered and the server is started. Things are fine. Pretty good. Now with this, we can go further to get that account object. We got that account object in controller, right? So we can now go to the service, create one service class, create one DAO class, and there you can auto wire for the JDBC template and start performing your insertion operation. We need to create a row mapper. Everything I will do it again manually so that you will get one round of understanding of the JDBC template usage. Now, if you have any questions on this, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll go for a 10 minutes of break. Any questions till this, please do let me know. I have given a step-by-step explanations. So please do let me know if in case you have any doubt. Any doubts? Any clarity you need, please? So instead of manually enabling the data source configurations without the support of JNDI, we did it in the earlier project, but right now it's only via the JNDI template. So we do a lookup and then we acquire the data source, and the data source is going to be injected into the Jdbc template. Nowhere we need to configure. If you notice, I'm not even doing the usage of the jar file, MySQL jar file. If you go back to the American Express, the pom.xml, you have to recall that in the dependency, we have added MySQL connector. Now the MySQL connector is not there in that in our project. Why? Because that MySQL connector is what is now set in the server level location. Server is going to maintain that, right? So we don't need that library anymore in our project. Is that clear? So if you have any questions, please do let me know. No questions? Things are clear? Okay. Anyone? Any questions? Please let me know. Okay, fine. If you have, we'll again try to have a query session after we connect from the break. So we'll go for a short break. Thank you. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So I guess you understood the logic of how we go via the JNDI to acquire the data source informations. Do you have any question? Okay, so considering that there's no much of a question, we'll move forward. So right away, if you look at the controller, we have this account object in hand, which actually fetches the account details, right? That we have seen on the console to confirm that we get all the data, what is fed on the form is getting captured into the account object, and this particular endpoint is receiving that. Now what we have to do is just go straight into the service, create a new class, and give the name as account service, and demarcate them with @service, and just write a method public boolean. I'm sorry, we'll call it as add account, right? And the same method we're going to have it in DAO class as well. So go to the DAO package and create a class account DAO, and this is going to be demarcated with @repository, correct? @repository, and drop the method. So here we are going to perform certain operations. The first one is @autowired, and autowire for whom? Jdbc template, Jdbc template, and uses Jdbc template here. Before that, let's declare a boolean result equals false, and Jdbc template dot, we need to get the object right that we forgot. Account object Jdbc template dot update, and we are going to say insert into account values, and the respective placeholders should come into place. There are 3 placeholders that right now we are offering. So the second argument is going to be object array. So new object of, and inside that account dot get account ID, comma, account dot get account name, comma, account dot get account balance. So all the 3 informations which you need to provide it inside this update method, and this update method returns the number of rows as an integer. So int number of rows, right? And if needed, you can handle them with a data access exception. If number of rows is greater than 0, then you can set the result as true, right? And at the end, return the result. Right now, I'm not handling the exception. I'll just leave it just like that. So we already have the account table in place, right? So right now we have only one record. So let's go back to the account service and try to do an auto wiring. And prior to that, account auto wire for whom? Account DAO. Account DAO, right? And account DAO dot add account and forward the account object to the account DAO class. Right? Now coming back to the skill-up controller, you're going to auto wire for at auto wired. For whom? It's account service, right? Account service, and copy this account service and account service dot add account and forward the account object to the service. And this will return a result, which is of a Boolean result equals. If result is true, you return it to success, else you return it to error. Okay, I will make this error slightly a different mechanisms by using exception handling in Spring MVC. I'll come to that shortly. But right now we don't have any error. So if needed, you can just go ahead and create error class. Error JSP page. Error.jsp file. And that error is going to have h1 style color colon red, something went wrong. Okay, fine. Is this logic? You're able to understand what's happening? Based on the return of the account service result, that's actually based on the result of the DAO, you're manipulating. If the result is true, you return it to the success page, otherwise you return it to the error page. That's the understanding of this code. It's a self-explanatory. I don't think it needs much of explanation. Now let's go straight away and see if we are able to successfully persist the record into the database. So we do a one round of full publish, and then we drive them to do an insert operation. Okay, so now let's go back to the form. Add account. Let's clear the console and let's await for if there is any exception occurs. So it's 121, or let's say 123. Balaji. The account balance is 255.65 something. hit add account. Now it's taking some time, you can see, but still it went to the success. We are able to capture the data, but the only thing is we have to see if it got committed in the backend. Absolutely, it got committed. So we have successfully inserted the record into the database. If something would have went wrong, then obviously it will return to the error page. So let's try that way around as well. I'm going to hit the add account again. Now this is an exception. We haven't handled the exceptions there, so that's why. What is error? Duplication error. It's a primary key, right? It's a unique representation of the column, the ID. 123 is primary key. So in order to work around with that, let's handle the exception first. That's been raised here. Try. Okay. Catch. All right. Data access exception, correct? That's the generic exception that we handled. Exception. And exception dot print stack trace. Cool. The only thing is we have to keep this out to 0. So obviously it's going to be 0 in this case, as it's not going to return any value since there's an exception occurs, but the rest of the line will get executed. We'll go back and do a one round of full publish. I guess these are self-explanatory. OK, you can just follow up with me like what happening. What is that I'm doing? So I'm just taking it to a when I apply try, it becomes the local scope. So only within the try you will be able to have access to the number of rows. So I made it a little outside to the try scope, and so that the exception occurs. So it comes to the catch. So number of rows will be defaulted to 0. If it is not greater than 0, then it's going to be defaulted to false because it's not going to get into the if block. OK. Yes, now we can go ahead and try if it redirects to the error page. So I'm going to insert 123 again. And this time it's Partha. Hit add account. Beautiful. Now we are redirected to error page. Sorry, something went wrong. But as in the backend, we have the log. So probably the developer or someone who is notified on this can look at what went wrong. So print stack trace is looking out for the duplicate key exception coming from the org spring framework.dao and says sorry, 123 already exists. So what we are going to do now, we're going to change that value to 124 or something, and then hit account. And this time it's successful. If you go back to the backend, refresh it, and you get that record. Now you're getting the channel of how to use the error page as well if something goes wrong. If you want to redirect to the same page, of course you can do that as well. You need not go for the separate page as a success page. In the same insertion record, you can say, hey, successfully it got inserted, something like that. You can work around. OK, so that's how it all happens in the connectivity with the backend. Are you getting it? So if you have any questions on this flow, please do let me know. Anywhere you need a clarity, please do let me know. So here it's a little simplified in connecting with the backend rather than you code it into the backend. This will be done. Who will do this setup? This will be done by the Jboss admin. Jboss admin team will configure everything for your, as per the MySQL, if you give the references, they will come here and do all their settings, and they will just give you the, for the developer, what they will give it, they will give only this JNDI name. Rest will all be taken care by them. We need not worry upon. Right. But in the earlier time, it's like we did everything. But who is going to be the Jboss admin? It depends on the team that you're going to work with. So you yourself can be an Jboss admin as well, or you might have, it could be a bigger team, it could be a bigger project, so you might have a separate resource allotted for acting as a Jboss admin as well. But I have played the roles of Jboss admin as well, and currently in the project to which I'm working, so I have more experience on working with Jboss EAP. And it's good to work around with the bigger enterprise application server rather than just playing around with the Tomcat. Okay, but most of the project still runs with Tomcat, but I would suggest you should also have more enriching knowledge on different other real-time enterprise servers that's been used in the projects. So any questions? No questions? Sure. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you exception handling. How Spring MVC does an exception handling. For that, I'm going to do one round of creating a JSP page for understanding the exceptions. So JSP page, JSP file, and here we can go ahead and define a search account page. So I have a search account JSP, and in the search account JSP, what we are going to do is I'm gonna use ZLink node false, and you'll be having a form. This time it's going to be a normal form. So it's just form action and method post, not a Spring form. I'll tell you why. Okay, because I'm not going to play around with model. Enter account ID so that you will get the information. Input, type text, and name as ACC ID, account ID. Then break and centerize this. We don't have center, it's obsoleted, but still I'm using it. So PG color, and next to this, input type submit and value search. Okay. Give a couple of breaks. So we have this page. Beautiful. So going back to the home, skill up home, you should have one more link referring to search page. So no JSP page, you should have a direct access. So anything you have to go via the controller. So it's a search account endpoint, search account. By this way, it should launch the page, right? So let's go back to the SkillUp controller. You go for creating one more get mapping right now. Search account public string search account form return search account, the name of the JSP page. That's it. No prefixing and suffixing required. Okay. So with this, let's see if that page is getting launched. So we'll go for a full publish. So it's getting fully published. We'll wait for it. We have to create one more method for accepting the form. Okay, we'll create that shortly. Okay, so I guess got started. Okay, now let's go back and refresh it. Yeah, so here you can see we have the add account and search account. Let's click on search account and you get the search page. Doesn't seem to be more visually appealing. So I'm gonna put center. Center. Okay. Search your account details is the heading. Without heading, it seems to be more abrupt. Okay. Okay. So now you have this page here, right? So what we have to do is we have to enter the value. Okay. We have to enter the value and we have to click the search. So when I click the search, so when I say 121 and if I click search, you should submit the form to someone and then you have to see to that it pulls the data from the backend and then you need to display it in the same page itself. In the same page itself, you need to do it. And that's what which we are going to see as a flow. So we have this complete logic. Let it be aside. We'll keep it aside. Let's go for the controller. We need to accept it. So for that, I'm going to use at post mapping public. And this time it's going to return model and view. Get, or I'm sorry, search account. Okay. And it's going to be called as search. So in our form, we have to give /search. Okay. So inside this, you have to accept the input that you are giving here. So how do you accept the input that we are giving in the text box? We have to go for HTTP servlet request, request.get parameter, parameter name is account ID. We don't want to do that because we have another option in Spring MVC called as request param. It's a shortened way to get one or two text box values. Request param, and the name of the param is ACC ID, and automatically it will convert it to an integer and call it as account ID. See how simple it is. A one-liner of step. Your job is done. Right. Now what you can do is you can temporarily create an account object with new account, okay, and place that account ID. This is a temporary process. We will change it. We will lively take it from the database and do it. Account ID, account name, and the balance. Okay. Now you have to quickly create model and view. By now you know what model and view. I gave a brief introduction of about the model and view. You can make use of this model and view to set your mv dot set view name. So what is the view name? It's going to be to the same view name, that is search account. It's going to bring it back to the same page. After submitting to this endpoint method, it will again bring it back to the same page. That is the meaning. What is an issue? Okay, this is a float. Okay, so set view name, sorry, set view name, and then mv dot add object. So this will help you to add the model object. Okay, so add object, and the object name I'm going to set it as account, and the object that I'm going to set this account object. Any name you can use. So this is like set attribute. In servlet we have the set attribute, right? It's the same way. So what exactly happens here is, I'll just give you a briefing. Once you click the search button, okay, you have a form, right? You enter 121, and when you click the search button, once I click this, it will come to this method. The value 121 will be captured and stored in this variable, and this variable is affixed here with other values, and an account object is created. We cook up a model and view, place the view name, and append this account object in the same model and view. This will be returned back. Okay, so it comes back to the same search account along with this model object. So we can use this model object by this name, and we can try to fetch these informations displayed in that page. That is a logic. Okay, so I'm going to return MV, right? So now let's see, going back to the JSP, that's here you need the JSP skills. Uh, so inside this, I can give some informations as expression language, and I'm going to use, what is the name that we have given for the model? What is the name that we have given for this model object? ACC. So we can use that ACC dot account ID to be printed, and then ACC dot account name to be printed, and then ACC dot account balance have to be printed, and between them I'm going to use a pipe symbols to differentiate it. The very first time it will be empty. That's okay. The next time it's not that. Okay, so let's go for a full publish. So can you give it as search results. So Just click search account. That's because this error page. Okay, I've given this error page. Sorry, is EL ignored, right? Is EL ignored? Yes. Is EL ignored? Why I'm not getting that? This. False. It's an expression language which should not be ignored. It's actually ignoring the expression language. So that's why that expression text is getting displayed here.
Sir, you are giving false and double quotation separate.
But it is unable to find this. Why is it so? A bit of weird. Okay, now that EL is not ignored, it's getting evaluated. Expression language is getting evaluated. It's a JSP expression language, like how we had a Spring expression language spell. The same way here it is for JSP. Now we have to feed in some informations and search. Why? The path is a problem. Before it was a Spring form, right? This time the path is a problem. So we have to give that exact path. So we'll copy it from here, home, take this and apply it here. Okay, the full path, if it's an ordinary form, okay, we need, you can see the path is, URL path is not applicable. It says account balance property is not applicable. It's not identifiable or it's not available because I've given a wrong name. So the property name and the name that we are affixing here should be same. Cool. You're getting the data. But from where these data should come from? These data should come from the backend, right? I should search. So let's say 123. For 123 also, I will get the same information summary. This is not dynamic, but the logic works. It goes to the endpoint. The endpoint accepts the value using request param and gets the value and creates an object, creates a model and view, send it back to the same page. I'm coming back to the same page. You're getting it. So how do we connect to the backend? Let's go quickly into the DAO. If you have any questions on this, please do let me know. Okay, only when you have a question, if you have a question, only when you raise it, I'll get to know. Otherwise, I'll be moving forward. So if you have any questions, I'll pause and then I'll answer your questions first. Not an issue. So simplified. I'm giving a clear step-by-step approach. Okay, nothing that even I'm not doing a copy paste. It's just a matter of doing a copy paste. I'm not doing it. I'm investing time to type it manually so that meanwhile your brain will have some breathing space to adopt what I'm saying and to learn the concept. So as much as possible, I'm avoiding the copy paste work. Okay, that's the nature of my delivery. That's the nature of my training. Always, not now. It's been done for more than 15 years. I'm doing the same work. So yeah, so please let me know if you have any question. These are expression languages. What exactly happens here is the object is already bounded. Okay, the object is bounded and we are sending back to this search account page again. When it comes to the page, It comes with the object. We are capturing that object with that name that has been set. And it's very easy, right? If it's a expression language, its usage is very easy. Otherwise, we will again use request dot set attribute, and coming to this page, we have to use request dot get attribute, get the attribute object, and then you use the object to use some expression tags or something like that. But those things can be automated here with the help of this JSP standard JSP expression language. Okay, now let's go back to DAO. In DAO, first thing is it's a select. So I'm going to quickly create one account row mapper. I guess we already have that. Okay, not a problem. Let's create it. I don't want to copy paste. Let me do it. Account row mapper. So what does account row mapper have to do? Mark them as that component temporarily if needed. Otherwise, you can manually create an object. That's not an issue. Either way, you can do it. Implements row mapper and override map row method. Wrongly used. There are two row mappers. I've used Java Xping library. Choose the appropriate one, and here it's going to be account, right? And now you can go for using the map row, and internally to it, you can create an account object. Equals new account of, and then account dot set account ID needed. You can set it again. So column name is account ID, and I'm sorry, rs dot. So rs dot get int, right? It's an int. So we are going to use this, and let's copy paste, say set account name, and this time it's going to be a get string. It's account name. Let's go back to the backend. Account ID, name, and balance. Okay, so column name is name, and the next one is balance. Balance is what? It's a float, and so account balance. Pretty good. So from the map row, we are going to return the account. That's it. Map row is ready. Now let's go back to account DAO. Let's quickly create a method. Public return type is account. Find by account ID, int account ID. Then Jdbc template. Before that, let's cook up the auto wiring of at auto wired. This way also you can do it for getting the row mapper, account row mapper object, and coming down here, Jdbc template dot query for object. Correct? We have to go for query for object. And the query for object, select star from account where account ID equals question mark. Correct? So account ID is question marked and new int of result type, right? Oh, forgot, sorry. Args int arg types. So what are the arg types? Are SQL types. SQL types.
SQL type dot integer, right, sir?
Yes, yeah, SQL type dot integer. Yes, correct. I'm just looking out for that. Arg type java dot SQL dot type. Sorry. Types dot integer. New object array of account ID. Hope you are able to follow up this. Okay. So we are setting the data type for the parameter that we are forwarding. Why it's still obsolete?
Row mapper, sir. Row mapper added.
Yes. So object account account row mapper. Account row mapper. Okay, we reversed. Query for object. Still not obsolete. Can give a row mapper directly. If it's required type. Object array and int array. Okay. Perfect. It's been set. So this is going to return a single object. That's okay. You can directly throw the return keyword here. And this is done. Just copy this. Go back to your service. And in the service, crop this, copy them, replace it, call it as find by count ID. And coming to your controller back. Coming to the controller, okay, that is, this is not used. In controller, we are not supposed to use this anymore. Rather, you just use account equals account service dot find by account ID. Correct? So this will get you the account object, and that account object is what is you need to punch it inside your model and view object and return the model and view object. So this stays more dynamic. I guess we already have 2 records there in the back end, 123, 124, and 5. We'll see if we are able to get those data back. So very simple. It's more straightforward, not of too complex. If you look at the code itself, you just go through the code, you can understand it. I'm just giving the flow. Okay, if it's a single text box, you want to get it, or 2 text boxes, you don't want to go via the model approach, then you can use request param to directly get the data from the text box with the text box name. And it'll automatically do the parsing work also. We don't need to do anything out there. So now let's go back, hit the search count and ask for 5. Beautiful. For 121. Okay, there is no 121. I'm sorry. Okay, 0. So now you can see the problem. What is the problem now? There's an exception. If there is no ID is found, there is an exception. That's what which I'm going to teach you how to handle this exception pretty well. So it's 123. It's Balaji. And what else? 124. 124 is Partha. Okay, we get those 3 informations from that backend. But if I give 130, I get an exception because there's no row to return of that particular object. So the size of the result set is 0. Actually, what is expected is 1. This problem exists. So how do we handle this exception? This exception can be handled with the help of exception handler mechanisms in Spring MVC, which is very important. Any interview you go for, you'll be asked for. There are 2 approaches of exception handling. One is local exception handling, that is controller level exception handling. Another one is common exception handling. Okay, so controller level exception handling is internally to the controller itself. Common exception handling can be achieved via controller advice. There's something called controller advice, and that's what which I'm going to explain right now. So let's think of having a local exception handling mechanisms right away. And so if there is any exception, okay, if there is any exception from any of the method, you need to have at exception. This is local to this controller only. In any other controller it happens, it won't handle this. Public string handle exception. Okay, and it can be any exception. So this time I'm going to say exception E. Okay, so you can handle that exception out here. Return to error page. I just want to return it to the error page. That is what this approach means. Okay, at exception handling, return it to the specific error page. Now you can also return it through a model and view if in case you want to add some informations. Okay, a model informations, if you want to add it, you can just add them and send it. But right now I'm not going to do that. Let's see. At exception handler, any exceptions it could be. Let's fully publish. So this is handled for only for this controller. If you have 6 back controllers, in any other back controllers, if such exception occurs, you cannot handle them. It will be explicitly an exception thrown on the page on the front end, because this is very closer to the controller level exception handling. Okay. So when I say 5, it fetches the data, but when I say 6, it takes me to the error page. So when there is any exception occurs, the exception is handled. But I don't want this to happen. I want to create a custom exception class. So what am I going to do here is I'm going to create an exception class in the util. We have the util class, right? So there, util package. There I'm going to create account ID not found exception. Okay, account ID not found exception is the type of exception class that I'm going to create. So with that, we create our own exception, and I'm going to raise that exception. So how is that? So you can have extends the base exception class. This is how we create a custom exception. And you can go ahead and do an account ID exception that is constructor. And you can have a string message for the exception. And you can use super off and call the base class exception by forwarding the message. That's it. A simple custom exception class have been created. Now coming back to our DAO, there we'll be having account ID not found. If the this is going to return account object if in case it's raising any exception, so it's better to handle here. Try catch. Data access exception. So inside the catch block, so outside to this, you can go for count was null, count was this, return count, and inside the catch throw, because I want to deal it with my custom exception. Okay, so that's why I'm going for it. Throw new account ID not found exception, and the message that I'm going to give is, hi, the given account ID, which is account ID, does not exist. Okay, so this is what which I'm going to do. So since we go for a throw, we need to say throws account ID not found exception. Okay, so this is pretty well aligned, and the same thing which you need to follow in the service, because it's raising the exception. So going to the service, you need to throw so coming to your actually here we need to raise an exception. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm doing a little bit of different logic. Just a second. Okay, that's fine. We'll say throws, not a big issue. So there's some exception that occurs here. So immediately the exception handler should be in place. It goes to the error, but this time I'm very specific to handle only the type of exception called account ID not found exception. Okay, it's exclusively for this class, this particular exception alone to be handled, not for any other exception. That's what this step means. Before it was common across any exception. Now I can create a model and view object. So I guess we can copy this. And here it's error page. And the message is just a variable, string variable. So it's exception. We gave the message, right? We need to pull that message and set it in the message reference name, error-message. Now coming to the error class, error page, like how we did for this one, the same way I'm going to use is really ignored in my error.jsp. And in here, I'm going to say $open and close curly braces, error-msg. I'm going to bind that message that's coming from the model. So at the end, when the controller is raising an account ID exception, this exception handler should be handled. There is a meaning. Now let's see if how this is going to work. So right click, full publish. But this is only applicable for this controller. If the similar type of controller is going to similar type of exception that other controllers are going to use, other controller are going to raise or handle, you cannot, because it's very specific to the controller specifics. That's why we go for the next level called controller advice. Controller advice is for common exception handling. One of the important interview questions that you will be getting. So through controller advice, you'll be able to handle the exception in a common mechanism. Any controllers, this type of exception occurs, controller advice is there. That is a meaning. Search account. If I go for 5, I'm getting the data. If I'm going for 6, Y0. Should get that message. Hi, the given account ID. Why this message is not getting displayed? Error-message. Oh, okay. I'm returning the error page alone. It should be MV, right? Now we need to return MV. So the return type is going to be changed to model and view. You can either return a string, just an error message, or you can do some business logic out like this and then return the model and view. Okay, that is a mistake. Okay, all set to go. We are done. And one last demo, we'll see it before we wind up for the day today. And that's all about the controller advice. So next week, we'll be seeing security and a bit of JDBC part and testing. So this week, Wednesday or Thursday, we'll be having 1 hour of session, and that 1 hour is not for query. We'll be having some understanding of the security part. That's very, very important. It's pretty complex as well. So I'm going to start from this week itself. So stay tuned, and that's very important. Security handling, security mechanism, in-memory security mechanisms is what which we are going to see. So please do attend the session. Don't miss it. Even though the recordings are there, it's a 3 hours or 1 hour, you will not tend to have time, or you will not tend to have the mindset to watch the recordings again and again. So you should force to attend the live sessions. Okay, so please do uh, commit to that. Even though the recordings are there, you cannot, because the mind won't be prepared for those recorded sessions sometimes. So if it's live, you might be a little bit active. What happened? Why am I getting the same? Right now I'm doing MV model and view error-msg goes to the error page. And in the error page, we are using error-msg. Okay, we'll do one thing. We'll confirm if that is coming into this method or not. So a sysout statement, say ex dot get message. If this is not coming, let me see what can be done next. Publish. Uh, I'm just trying to do a little bit of history clearance. So let's see if it's able to fetch it. Uh, okay, this time it's loading. Meanwhile, I'll clear this console. So, okay, that is a trouble. Okay. It should work actually. Let's see. For if it's not, we'll take it up later. The browser is not responding. Let's go for force quit. Launch. Okay, so yeah. So for 5, for 6. There is some issue. So here we are getting it high. The given account ID 6 does not exist. But it's coming to this, coming back to the error hyphen message, right? ACL ignored false. Club controller. Hmm.
mv dot add object or something else? mv dot.
No, that is add object. Yeah, it's a string object, right? That's how I took it.
Okay. Okay.
So six. Dollar open close curly braces error message error hyphen message. It's absolutely fine. What's an issue? It's coming here and it's printing hi. The given account ID is ID6 does not exist and returns MV. Because that's what we did here, right? We used mv.add object to add the account object the same way here. Okay. Let me try the other way around. String message. One last try. Otherwise, let me see what's the problem is, but I'll try to give you the insight about the controller advice because I don't want to extend to the next week. Probably I'll take another 5 more minutes. Model set view name add object. That's correct. Skill up search. Hmm. Okay, let me check this. Quickly, I'll do one thing. Just go ahead here on the util, create one class called skill up bank exception handler. Okay, this is just a class that we are creating. And this class will be marked as at controller advice. Okay, and you can copy the same method what you have written there. The same thing up here in this. The only difference is you are going to use it here. Okay, that's the only difference. Again, here the at exception handler. Any controller in anywhere, the exception, if that exception occurs, this handler is there. If you want one more handler to be added, you can add down here as many number that you want it. Okay, so that's what it means. So it's just a matter of marking them as at controller advice, which is internally at component. So this class will get registered. So let me remove this error message to error. And in the object, I'm going to call it as just error. And coming to the skill up controller, I'm going to comment this. So comment this, then so to confirm it's coming into that controller advice, I'm going to give a sysout inside the controller advice. This is just for a proof. Okay, now the flow comes via the controller advice, not with your internal exception handler. What if in case if both are there? If both are there, it gives priority to the controller level exception, not for the controller advice. Okay, it's better not to have in both the place of ideally. But if in case if you have in both the places, then priority will be given to the lower level. That's inner to the controller advice. I'm sorry, inner to the controller. If you have a exception handler, that's one will be picked up. But why the error message is not getting loaded? That's a question. Somewhere this is not getting tracked. So it's happening now here. I'm not sure why it didn't happen there. Seems to be a little weird. See, if I give 131, so 131 ID does not exist and it's going to your error page. If you want to redirect and throw the error page down here itself, of course you can do it. You don't need to go to the next page and then you need to do that. Instead, what you can do is you can just bring that up here, the error page informations, which you can carry here in your search account page, right? And before this, let's try to have that BR. And in your controller, advice, instead of giving error page, it's search account. Okay. Let's go for the full publish. You can see inside the controller advice message was there printed in the earlier request, right? That's a proof that it comes into the controller advice. Probably I guess it's because of that error hyphen message. That's a predefined value. Okay, I guess I got the problem. Let's see that. That naming convention is a problem, I guess. So 5 works. 1001 doesn't work. The error message pops up here itself. So if I say 5 again, the error message will go and you will get the output. 121, error message will come. 123, error message won't come. 124, error message won't come. Okay. So this is actually with empty. We are submitting it with empty. So we need to do some validation here. That can also be done, but usually we do it with JavaScript, right? So we don't tend to do much of, but I'll show you the validations in the on Wednesday or Thursday. Okay, we can do a validation and you can throw an error message here. We have a Spring error message to be tracked. So this is how it works. And the main problem or the culprit here is this. I guess so. It's this. So it's I can give ERR, something like this. So this time I'm going to comment this one. No controller advice for a while. We'll just test this once again. So and inside controller level, sysout controller level exception, right? And coming to this is the error change that we have done. So in search account, we have to change this to ERR and do a full publish. Now I'm not going via controller advice. We don't need to switch off. You can enable that. Anyways, it gives priority to the internal local controller advice, local exception handling. So search account. The problem is this. It's going to the search page, error page. Right. So that's ERR. Inside controller level. Perfect. It works. Okay. If you want to bring it to the same page, then just change the view name here. Right. To what view name? To the same page. You want a link, then it's search account. So the problem was this error hyphen message. So it was having a predefined reference to that variable. So that's why it was not able to pick up. So now it will bring back to the same. So that's it. I'm done. So controller advice, it has to be demarcated with @controller advice class level. It's a component, so automatically IOC container will trace them as a component, create an instance. And the controller advice denotion is to create a common exception handler for the whole Spring MVC application. In any controller, the exception occurs with this type of account ID. This controller advice will be picked up. That is the meaning. Okay. Is that clear? That's it. It works fine. So let's say 145.678 something, and you get that message out here. If it's a proper 124, then you get that result. Is that clear? Any questions, please do let me know. I'm done with it. Sorry, I've taken another 7 more minutes. So if you have any questions, we'll go for it. So this Wednesday or Thursday, I'm not sure. I'll pick the day based on my workload currently in my organization. So I'm a little engaged with heavy work. This itself is like a continuous process. So I'm feeling a little exhausted at times since it's Monday through Friday, even on Saturdays I work because in the morning there will be an interview panel. So I need to interview people. A little bit of exhaustion happens. So I'll try to see. And next week, I'm not sure if I can go for 3 hours. I'll try to take it up to 2 hours per day, Saturday and Sunday. It depends on how much concept is pending. So based on that, we'll try to fine tune the hours. If needed, even after that week, we'll try to continue. Okay, not an issue, but the number of hours will be reduced. So any question? Security is very, very important. You should know how to handle at least with a minimum of in-memory authentication. We have authentication authorizations, in-memory authentication process. Uh, JDBC authentications are there. So probably I'll try to give both. But we have something called OAuth, Open Authentication, JSON Web Token. But those things I'll be unable to take up in this course. It's not going to be covered. That's a little high-end implementations. Probably those are punched in or plugged in into Spring Boot. When we go for Spring Boot, it's a little bit easier to configure them. And probably if the time permits, I'll try to come up with Spring Boot course shortly, but not in the near future. After this course, a short break will be there. So any question? I'm sorry, I'm talking more from my side. If you have any questions, please let me know. Actually, you have to go through this project thoroughly, then only you will come up with the understanding. So go through it, practice it, make this project executed in your application. If the JNDI doesn't work, you bring them back to traditional data source creation. Use your property files in the resources. You can just go ahead and create a property file. Okay, that you can do, and use the traditional mechanism of using your uh, the data source informations. Okay, so you can create an application.properties and you can configure here and do it if in case JNDI doesn't work. For Tomcat, I'll try to get you the blog. With that, you can set up in the Tomcat. But if you're interested to go for Jboss, the recordings are there. Go through the recordings step by step, step by step. Follow that, apply it, and you're done with it. I'll also share the module.xml for your reference so that you can use it. Any questions? Okay, I accept your silent as there's no question anymore. So thank you for your time and have a great week ahead. We'll catch it up on either Wednesday or Thursday. And that's a 1 hour session, but that's going to be completely on a topic related. That's security part, which we are going to start. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Stay
Thank
safe.
you.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Thank you, sir.